All right, so lesson 1.7 is all about function notation. So being that that's what the lesson is about, the vocab word to begin with is function notation. It is found on page 51. And your dependent and independent variable vocab words are found on page 52. Please make sure these are in your notes because you're going to be able to use your notes when we take our tests and quizzes. All right, so just as a quick reminder how this is set up, if you have f of x is equal to 5x plus 3, remember that this piece right here is the same as saying your y, which is the same as saying your dependent variable. It is also known as your output value. So lots of different ways we can talk about this. So again, your y value, your dependent variable, or your output variable. Okay, versus this guy right here, your x, obviously known as x, it is your independent variable. Okay, and it is known as your input. That's where we input our values in order to figure out then what our output would be over here. Okay. If we are given the equation f of x is equal to 7 minus 2x, part of your homework asks you then just to use these values right here and see what you get. So again, this is written as f of x, so all it's asking you to do is put this value of 0 in where we see x. So we'd have 7 minus 2 times 0. Remember your order of operations, 2 times 0, that's just 0. So your output would be 7. Then you redo it and you do it a second time, this time using a half. So you'd have 7 minus 2 times a half. Again, PEMDAS will do this part first. So 2 times a half would just give me 1. 7 minus 1 gives you 6. All right, and our last one, we had 7 minus 2 times negative 2. Now be careful on here because you have a negative 2 times a negative 2, so this guy ends up being a plus 4 right here from here. Okay, so 7 plus 4. That gives me 11, okay? The other way they may ask you to do it is from a picture. So they'll likely have these same values over here. We're plugging in 0, a half, and negative 2. As a reminder, this is f of x. So I'm going to go on my x axis down here, and I'm going to go to 0, and then I'm going to read up and see what the value is. Okay, so at an input of 0, my output is 4. At an input of a half, I'm going to read up. Looks like my value right here would be 3.5. And then at negative 2, here's negative 2, I'm going to read up. Looks like my output is 2. All right, then as a reminder, we talked about how to graph on here. Now, you could just graph this plain old linear function if you knew how. Just using your y equals mx plus b, knowing that you have your y-intercept and you have your slope. But on this one, it's actually restricting our domain. Okay, so what I like to do for something like this is figure out, since we know it's a linear function, it's going to be a straight line. It's going to be going up because the slope is positive. I only really want to figure out the values for negative 3 and for 2 because I can just connect those dots in a straight line since it's linear. So if I put in a negative 3 in here, I'd have 2 times negative 3 plus 1. So that'd be negative 6 plus 1. So I get out a negative 5. Versus if I go to the top end of my domain and I plug in a 2, I'd have 2 times 2 plus 1. So I'd have 4 plus 1. So it looks like I'm getting out of 5. So if I were to go to graph this, again, it doesn't have to be anything super fancy. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, great graph. So at negative 3, 1, 2, 3, I was at negative 5. There's my dot. And at positive 2, I was at 5. Again, linear function, so you can connect the dots. And if you're good at your graphing, we again said our y-intercept was 1. I did go through there, so it works out. Now, I do want to fix one thing on my graph. This guy right here tells me that I should be using a closed circle. So I'm going to make this extra closed right here. Okay, versus this inequality over here tells me it's an open circle. So I'm going to go back to this guy and make it open. Okay, so just be aware of that with your domain, included versus excluded. All right, last one I want to go over is just a quick story problem. It says a local shop will develop photos for 27 cents per print. So we need to write a function for this guy. So y equals, okay, that starts our function, or you are welcome to write it as f of x equals, Okay, and if it's just 27 cents per print, it would be 0.27x. Okay. The second part asks us to do an input of 24. So on that input of 24, since it's an input value, it just goes in where x is. So we'd have 0.27 times 24, and what it should be giving then is our output. Again, you can write that as y or f of x. Okay, so once we put that in there, we need to then again figure out what the price is, and the price ends up being $6.48. I'm going to put my dollar sign out in front. Okay, so what does it mean? It means we're getting 24 prints for a cost of $6.48. That's it.